people usually ask me, how do you not get depressed with that topic that you're working on? And it's precisely because we see so many people with ideas and innovations and drive to solve things and be part of, creating a future that is worth living for and worth handing over to the next generation. And that, I think, is very uplifting.
Welcome to the Swisspreneur Show, a podcast about startup stories and learnings from experienced entrepreneurs. Here's your host, Ansuya.
Thank you, Nathalie, for joining us today. I'm really excited to have this conversation with you. I think this is a very important topic in today's time, and especially the efforts that your company is making, and to just learn from your journey.
Thank you for having me here this morning.
Nathalie is a co-founder and CEO of Climate Now, which is a foundation financing and investing in climate solutions. And we'll start first with your journey, like how it all began. You were born in Switzerland with a Spanish background, and during your childhood, your parents worked in India. So how did this international upbringing shape you?
My parents took me to India when I was 2 months old. And imagine, I'm 43 now. So taking a baby to India as Spanish and Swiss parents was quite something back then. I think there's nothing I can pinpoint and tell you, those are the three things that impacted me. It was more this experiencing being brought up in a different context, being aware, when also coming back to Switzerland, of the little differences that, you don't grow up in a bubble, but your horizon expands somehow. So when I was 4 years old, I came back, and when I saw snow for the first time, I was a bit scared because I thought there were mosquitoes. But it just gives you an idea of, it's not a fixed idea of life. I think that has accompanied me, that my horizon is broader than just the Swiss bubble. And I think that's what has shaped me throughout the years. And I lived in different places after India on my own as well. Also trying to expand my horizon there.
Okay. And how did your interest in, working, because you worked first in philanthropy as well, and then you started your own businesses, consulting work after that. So how did all of the interest in doing your own thing began?
Out of basically lack of finding an exciting opportunity that I wanted to engage in. I wasn't born into a family of entrepreneurs. It was really the drive to knowing what you want and not finding it out there and just trying it out and having somewhat the courage to try it and to maybe fail along the way. And you don't know whether you're an entrepreneur or not unless you try it.
Yeah.
And so I think that for me was key, just not finding what I wanted.
And that was basically when, was it you were working for these big consultancies also, and then you joined the philanthropic foundation. So was it that point where you already started thinking, I want to do something meaningful?
Yes, definitely. I as you said, I worked for PwC and Bain & Company. And while those are all or were worthwhile experiences, I took a lot of things with me that I can use now in looking at businesses, making good investments. It also always left me with this question, making profitable companies more profitable. Is that what I want to be doing for the rest of my life? And what do I look back on after a strategy case at the consultancy? There were a lot of exciting things, but nothing I said I would be super proud to tell my children one day.
I can understand that. And then in 2012, you left the LGT Venture Philanthropy Foundation and you created your own consultancy, Mavia. Was this your first array into entrepreneurship?
Yes, it was. With all the hardship and heartaches that come with it. Being excited about starting something new with a partner back then, and having a fallout. There's hiring people, firing people, all of these things. So for me, that was the first step into my entrepreneurial journey, if you want.
And how was it like to go into business with your partner? And that's something I didn't know of. Like, I'm sure a lot of people would be curious to know, because I know companies like Soda, where they're a couple and they're running that. So how did that work?
Well, we're not a couple, which was good.
Okay. Yeah.
We didn't know each other too well, which somehow was good too, because if you're friends, that's also challenging. But in hindsight, I think we didn't know each other well enough.
Okay.
So
that was kind of the hindering
I
point.
think you need to know somebody in difficult situations, because you'll always run into them as an entrepreneur. And it's important to know the other person in a conflict or in a difficult situation, how they react.
Yeah.
And usually, challenges come up either when there is money or if there is no money.
Yeah.
And the same kind of happened to us. So that's what I would learn from it. And
they always say that the co-founder that you have, it's like selecting your partner like you would do in a marriage. It's the same kind of thought, and you face similar challenges but in a different context. So you really need to learn each other and see how it fits.
I agree fully. You have to be able to trust the other person fully, to be transparent about things, to be aligned on where all of that is going, especially also what the roles and responsibilities are, because one tends to have like more drive than the other, and then that needs to be agreed upon. Okay, I'm holding the fort here in the background while you're kind of fighting on the front line, or. But there's a lot of talking that needs to be done, and I agree with you. Yes, it's like choosing your partner. Definitely, I should have dated longer than I did with my business partner before getting married.
Yeah. That's a good learning point, I feel, for all founders. Then in 2017, you became CEO at Datuma AG within the mandate of Mavia. Where you met with the Miley family, who proved to be instrumental in your future career path. So, how are they connected to Klima now?
I've worked with the Miley family for a long time. Now that you mention it, they have been instrumental in shaping Klima now. I think we together came to the same point that we wanted to focus our attention to one of the SDGs that we thought were the most important and the most pressing one, and the one that will transpire through all other issues that we're facing in the world. And through that collaboration, we were able to, me going from being their impact investing advisor to at eye level, really sitting at the same table and saying, let's create something together. And that's not to be taken for granted, because to change the dynamics and the roles people have around the table is quite something. And that needed also exchange and transparency and laying it out and saying, this is, I want to be co-founder here. I'm co-creating this, and we are co-creating this together. So they have from the very beginning been instrumental to Klima Now, when it was really just a spark, an idea.
Okay. And two questions about this, right? Because I think especially today's time, I see it to be more and more upcoming topic, like for people to get into climate related entrepreneurship. As a person who hasn't touched on that subject at all before, like how did you, or how does one rather get knowledge about it and start working in this topic?
Well, for me, it wasn't completely new, as I had been in impact investing as well. I think for somebody who's not in touch at all, it's hard to avoid it these days. You know, you see young climate activists. You read articles in the newspapers, like this morning, from the Klimasenjorinnen who go and sue, Switzerland for not taking responsibility in climate action. So it's everywhere. I think the question is not how to learn about it, but how to act upon it, and how to create agency in a topic that is so big and so overarching and so scary, and it's easier to leave it up to the policymakers and the private sector to do something, and you're left with, recommendations like turn off the light and, take shorter showers and so on. But to really think about how you can go about it and make it your own topic, I think it's one of the big challenges.
Yeah, it's a very systemic issue. It pervades everything we do, how we live in life. Which brings me to the next question: that what excites you about impact entrepreneurship?
Exactly that, the solutions. We also say at Klima Now, we believe in solutions. And people usually ask me, how do you not get depressed with that topic that you're working on? And it's precisely because we see so many people with ideas and innovations and drive to solve things and be part of creating a future that is worth living for and worth handing over to the next generation. And that, I think, is very uplifting.
I agree. Oh, wonderful. So Klima Now is a not-for-profit tackling climate change. What is the current climate situation, and how close are we to the infamous tipping point?
Well, talking about being depressed, right? Exactly. I hope you're going to ask different questions afterwards.
I think at first it's so important for people to know the gravity of the situation before we get into how we're trying to solve it.
Yes. So I always say we're a foundation by structure and a venture by heart. So that's why we're more solution oriented. But yes, of course, the situation is very urgent and pressing, and the reports from scientists show us that we always talk about the 1.5 to 2 degrees global warming that we need to achieve. 1.5 is definitely the better scenario, and we're already at 1.1 or 1.2, and it might seem as, what does a decimal point really matter? And it matters a lot because those shifts in temperatures have big impact on, as you say, the different tipping points. And I watched a presentation at the World Economic Forum from a scientist talking about the tipping points, and some of the tipping points are also already showing, signs of instability. And the thing with a tipping point is it's irreversible. So once those processes of the melting ice in the North Pole and other tipping points happen, those are processes that are put in motion for thousands of years. So even if we then reduce to zero emissions within 1 year, which won't be possible, but hypothetically, that wouldn't change anything anymore.
Yeah, we kind of saw it during the pandemic, like that time where, nobody was going out, animals started coming out. Like we had a less footprint on the planet because we were just kind of cooped up inside globally, at least. But I don't think that made a lot of change afterwards because we're now back to business as usual. I don't know. What do you think about that?
I think it has an effect momentarily, and but that's the nature of humans, I guess. Everything that is an immediate threat is scary. Everything that is far away and you cannot grasp it, really. We're talking about huge numbers, either huge numbers or small numbers when it comes to changes in warming. and you don't really know what to do with this. I think when you read the news, or you see the news, though, and you see all those changes in extreme weather situations, hazards, too much water in one place, too little water in other places, storms coming up, and so on. So those are signs that are increasing, and just show us it's coming. It's coming.
Yeah.
It's coming closer.
We have it right in front of our faces.
We having exactly. Yeah. It's what is difficult is to sit in the pristine bubble of Switzerland and try to explain to people how dire the situation actually is. Because, I mean, look outside, everything seems to be almost perfect unless you look to the glaciers.
Right.
Then that's a symbol or something people understand here. But mostly it's the people in the global south suffering from the, from climate change effects that are showing.
And do you think that, governments across nations, do you think they're doing enough, or there's more that
no,
they need
absolutely
to do?
not.
Yeah.
But we know that also, the latest IPCC report shows graphs where you can actually see that the current policies in place take us to about more than 3 degrees global warming. So even with all the promises and everything that is being done, and it's not enough. It's just not enough.
All right.
And not fast enough. I think that's another challenge.
And let's, talk about, because you mentioned like they're globally in the South, countries are being, more affected by this. Like, what role do richer countries like Switzerland have to play in all of this?
There's this misconception that, Switzerland's such a tiny country compared to China or the US, our emissions don't matter at all. And it takes responsibility from all of the nations to act. You can't just leave it out to somebody else. B, we are a country that imports a lot of emissions as well. So we can't just be proud of having low emissions produced in our own country, since we don't have a lot of production to start with. And C, I think being one of the financial centers of the world where a lot of money flows through, is invested, and that money comes from somewhere. So it's time to take, responsibility. Generally, developed countries have to take on more responsibility in the climate change matter for the global south. And you can see that, movement happening. There's a loss and damage fund set up that was set up with pledges at COP27. But if you look at the numbers, I think it's around 200 million that were pledged. That is really nothing compared to what is needed. So while we're happy to see a movement and responsibility being at least acknowledged and accepted, the let's say how much activity is going on and how much that is translated into action and actual funding still has a way to go.
You mentioned that there was a big discussion at the Conference of Parties in Cairo in 2022, big promises, but the action plan is quite vague. So why do you think that is? Like, why aren't people able to come up with something more actionable and concrete?
I think because there's different agendas and the whole economic development, thinking of how to grow an economy. We need to grow. That has to be decoupled from climate change. And it's difficult to align all those open and hidden agendas. And you see that in the commitments of phasing down coal or phasing out coal. So one little word can change a lot and make a huge difference. And it's really a matter of negotiation. And it's very sad because they're negotiating with all our future and not taking on the responsibility with that sense of urgency that they need to.
Yeah, makes sense. talking about, the fact that a lot of this burden has to be taken on by the poorer countries, where most of the production is happening, most of the manufacturing work is also coming from there. How can we what can we do about this asymmetry?
It's a complex question.
Yeah.
There's no silver bullet.
Right.
I just came back from OECD meetings in Paris with the biggest philanthropy organizations in the world, and they're active in health, in education, and gender, and so they have, their programs are deeply rooted in local communities all over the world, and they're trying to understand how they can translate, what they do into, and not into climate action, but include this lens into it. And I think what we need to do is to be aware that those communities are very prone to what's happening, and we need to support them in becoming more resilient. And while we definitely in developed countries need to mitigate emissions as much as possible, I think we unfortunately today have to start thinking about how can we help the global south be more adapted to what's coming, and build more resilience. And I know this is not a very concrete answer, but there's so many topics that go into this. If you're talking about agricultural practices, you need to look at how can you make programs more resilient. It's just it's a systemic approach that is needed. There's no silver bullet, but I think this awareness that, supporting local communities to become more resilient, and including them in solution finding, that will be important, because usually they know the context best, and to avoid a bit this colonialistic attitude of, we're going to come and save you and we know it best, to really, co-design what adaptation should look like, and how to build resilience.
Yes, that's completely true. And I mean, the reason why we're probably refraining from it could it also be that the climate topic is as well a political discussion. You had mentioned that, Klima now is trying to fight a bit the stigma that is around the climate change topic, because it is also considered to be like an activist topic, per se, and business networks need to kind of define their own path, right, on all of this. Like you mentioned that you want to appear not green, not as activists. So even though you are a foundation by structure, but you want to be taken as seriously as an entrepreneurial venture. So how do you see this whole thing kind of impacting these actions?
Climate change is treated as a very political topic, and it's on the agenda of each political party. And we're trying to shy away from that, because this left-right thinking will not get us anywhere. Neither side has the full solution.
Yes.
What we do is we support, political initiatives we think are important. We try to support good policy making by supporting projects that, for example, work different with parliamentarians to how to come to, idea finding and decision making, or we look at important votes that come up, like the one on the 18th of June from the climate protection law. This is a vote we cannot lose, like last year, and if we lose that one, we are really, really not on the right track for the Paris Agreement. And so things like that we try to support. We also mobilize, the sector around policy making, not necessarily around politics, but policy making, and that in itself is a challenge, because charitable foundations and organizations shy a bit away from getting their hands into the policy topic. They don't want to be political animals, and it's easy to mistake one with the other, and that's why they shy away. But it's necessary. We just know that about 80% of the emissions we need to reduce will be reduced through the right policies.
You also mentioned that only 2% of the philanthropic giving goes to climate, which is too low, right? Why do you think that is, and how can we change this?
I think it's because philanthropy covers several challenges and crises. Climate change is not the only crisis. Everybody's talking about polycrises, and after COVID, the world went into an education crisis,
right?
And there's different other, and wars, and so on, and poverty. There's a lot of big topics that philanthropy is tackling, and only so many means. And I think it just takes, now is a moment where this shift of attention and focus is needed, and you can feel it happening. So coming again back from Paris, the two days of discussions were only about climate change and about how philanthropy can play a role, and how to integrate it in the current thinking. I feel it's easier for big foundations in the international space to have that big picture view and the resources to do so, to put in the right research, as opposed to in Switzerland, where we have around 13,000 foundations, and 80% of them have less than 5 million endowment. So it tells it's a lot of small institutions, and they prefer to support smaller projects where you see the output and the results immediately. And it's harder to finance something and support something that has a systemic change, because that is very difficult to achieve, takes a long time, and the outcome is very, very insecure.
I mean, there are so many obstacles, to tackle this topic for you. Another one that you mentioned was that getting good projects is also difficult, right? There are not because you're not in the broad sustainability umbrella, you're purely in the climate change space. So how do you manage that?
It's still a challenge, I must admit, with the open mic. It's a conversation we just had yesterday. We, as you mentioned, we have the investment side, and we have the project side where we fund with donations, and we feel that the investment side is a lot more professional, because you have to. It's clear if you want an investor to put in $500,000 into your venture, you're gonna have to convince them of your business plan, your business model, show them that you have the right team in place, put the right agreements on the table. It's all very professional.
Yeah.
And on the other side, you have, the projects that need donations, and sometimes they come and want 1.5 million for something that cannot really explain what the result will be, and with like 2 pages written up, and it just tells you a little bit. Also, they're used to that, right? I mean, I'm talking about Switzerland, and they're used to receiving funding like that, and we're different. We're really about impact and looking at what is it exactly that you're doing, and we're not making a huge difference between our investments and projects, and I guess they're not used to that. So we're really thinking of how can we, what we're living on the investment side and behind the scenes, how can we put that out so it's clear also to to projects wanting funding from us, you know, what is the ask? What is the quality we expect? What is the level of detail we want to see? And it's a little bit educating.
Yeah, I was just going to say that it's a big educational endeavor as well, you know, to show them how this needs to be done. And that they need to also learn like how to understand like the impact of different actions that they take, because it's like one affects the other, which may not be the case with other things or other topics that they're focusing on. It's quite simple in that sense, and this becomes a bit more complex. Do you think that this complexity refrains people also from then getting into such initiatives?
I don't know if that refrains people from getting into it. Probably more from, hopefully, from applying for funding with us. Because, then you can save your time. If you're not prepared to put in detailed thinking into what you're doing, how you're doing it, and what ideally should come out at the end of the day, then we're not the right partners.
So, you're looking basically for people that are really devoted to this topic and understand the topic. I guess that's also important in that sense.
And putting the diligence into what you're doing, and being accountable, and seeing your donors more as investors. Those are organizations investing in your ideas. Whether you give them a return, a financial return or not, is a different story, but they're investing in an idea that you're bringing to the table, and that should be taken with responsibility and respect, I think, on both ends.
I mean, in Switzerland in general, in the startup scene, let's say, I don't see a lot of such ideas being talked about, right? Why do you think that is? Or do you think that's changing now?
Ideas regarding climate change?
Yes.
No, I think there is movements. Not everybody calls itself a climate tech company, but everything that has to do with nutrition, food, alternative proteins, and the whole circular economy movement. That's also, I mean, that's a challenge of climate in itself. That's the variety of topics.
Exactly.
So I think what we're missing is just the climate label, but a lot of them come in different facets of what they can contribute to as a solution to climate change. So I wouldn't say that there's no movement. There's for sure could be more, and I think subsidies for innovation would also help.
Makes sense. I think you're right. Like it's from that labeling perspective, right? Because when you talk about like healthcare, it's clear what companies come under that, even though there is still like a little bit of that overlap can be there between different industries. But when you talk about climate tech, and then you also talk about sustainability, there's like so many different types of projects and companies that can fall under it, that not having that climate label doesn't give that visibility to everyone, right? That these companies are also impacting climate change in that sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let's talk a little bit about, who are sort of the main opponents for the supporting the climate change topic. So we mentioned that, systemic change will mean that challenging, many existing economic interests. How will this be managed through our existing legal frameworks? How will the economy adapt?
You're asking difficult questions. Yes, I mean, there's obvious opponents. I mean, the whole fossil fuel industry obviously doesn't want to run out of business immediately, but are also the ones who will be investing into renewable energies. So it's a matter of when they will really shift and so the kid never wants to let go of the candy. So
Yeah.
so there you have opponents, and from a political sense, I think it's the right wing party that is opposing it, less for climate reasons and more for just political reasons, to be opposing the left side, the left wing, and so to give you an example, the Association of Female Farmers has just said that they're supporting the campaign, the pro campaign for the climate protection law that will be up for vote on the 18th of June. And farmers are known to be more on the right wing side, and so things are shifting. I think for businesses and economy, it will matter who takes on a proactive role in the transition and who will be a follower. So there's a business opportunity in it. You can be a first mover. You can think about innovation, and invest into making your value chains climate neutral where possible. You can invest in new technologies as a business development perspective. You can find products that your future consumer would actually appreciate, because there's a lot of education going on as well, and so consumers will not want to have climate damaging products anymore or services. So you can do that as a company, or you can wait until business as usual is too expensive. And that's where the legal frameworks will come into place, where, carbon will have a price that is just too high to continue to do what you're doing. And that's where policy needs to, support innovation and kind of put a financial burden on the business as usual. And that's where it can be a lever. So yes, the opponents will have to make the shift, I guess. And what is also important is to consider who the losers are of a net zero transition. Like we're looking at the moment together with other foundations into doing a research piece on climate damaging subsidies in Switzerland. And what do you do once you have that information? So that's something we need to think about now, because nobody likes to be told off. So we can't run to the government afterwards and say, you're not doing your job. I mean, we can, but it's not a good start for a discussion. But you have to kind of involve stakeholders early on. And also, there are some losers too. If, let's say, milk is not subsidized as it is now, then obviously you have losers of a net zero transition. In that sense. And so you need to include those perspectives, because those would naturally and understandably be the ones that are in the way of a swift transition. So we need to find incentives and alleviate those losses somehow.
So do you also, like you mentioned, like through policy making, you're playing also a part in this. So could you give some examples of what kind of work you're doing in that space?
Well, we've just gathered a couple of foundations around the climate protection law campaign to close the financial gap there was. We know that getting to a 52% yes on the 18th of June, we need around 5 million. And we needed to close that gap. And we did that through, mobilizing other foundations, but also having some wealthy individuals gather and put in their commitment. So that's one way how to support this. I think the other way is to put data and information into places where there's question marks, like the one I just mentioned to you on the climate damaging subsidies. That's where foundations can add value, to give decision makers the right information and basis for decisions to be made. And one other thing we're looking at is public information that also shapes a lot how decisions and votes are made in Switzerland, and we find that there's not a lot of good journalism on this matter. There's very few journalists who really talk about it or write about it in a meaningful way. And of course, publishing houses have their own political background, agendas, and so on. But there is movement in that direction, and we like to support that thinking. How to get to better climate journalism in Switzerland, and all of that contributes to a more enabling ecosystem that will hopefully enable better policy making as well.
Wonderful. And so far, who have been your biggest supporters?
To start with, our funders, our founders and funders were our biggest supporters from day one, where Klima Now was just an idea.
Right.
And then really the community, the community of people who have put in their ideas in, for example, our annual award we call Spotlight, where we ask the community for ideas, and then we, together with the jury, decide on which ideas get on the Wall of Fame. And this Wall of Fame is then put up and for the public to vote. And in the first year, we had 17,500 votes coming from all those mini communities, from these idea givers. And that was amazing to see. And I think those are the biggest supporters. We're trying to create and contribute to the positive tipping point in society, to create this agency that I'm talking about. How can you make this your own topic? How can you engage in a way that goes beyond just donating 20 francs? How can you see yourself as being part of, designing the future through solutions, through voting, through consumer choices, and so on? So we're trying to mobilize people, the community in that direction, and we're aiming for 100,000 people in the next 5 years. It's a big number, and it's a symbolic number in Switzerland. With 100,000 signatures, you can move the law, basically. So with the supporters we've had so far, I think those are our greatest supporters, and each one counts.
Yes, wonderful. And let's talk a bit about, the success and future plans for your organization. Earth's clock is ticking, and, Klima Now's work is more relevant than ever. So what does your team aspire to do in the near future?
We continue to do what we are doing with a little bit of more focus. The community side is an important one. We've also learned that addressing everybody all the time will not work. So as a learning organization, we had to go back to the drawing board and say, if we really want to mobilize a lot of people, we need to go about it differently. And so we're focusing for the next couple of years on youth, so young people between 18 and 35. So you would match perfectly. Maybe I can recruit you for what we're trying to do.
I would be happy to have you. I really like your enthusiasm and the work you're doing. So count me
great,
in.
Good. I'll make sure to tell that to Claudia from my team. She'll be very happy to hear that. So what we're trying to do with young people is we want to set up like Klima Now teams. So teams, if you would be a Klima Now leader, basically, you would gather a couple of people around you to meet regularly, how regularly you want. Yeah, exactly, like meetups. And you could decide, is my team a team that wants to learn about a specific topic and then we exchange? Or is my team an entrepreneurial team that wants to bounce ideas peer to peer? Or is it maybe a team that is more activist, wants to, get some action going? Or are we a commitment team where we say, okay, for 1 year, we're going to do this, or within 1 year, we're going to mobilize our families to do X, Y, Z. So that's where we are. We're at the moment, also with a couple of young people bouncing ideas on what would work, and we're recruiting those Klima Now leaders to to take this opportunity and create your own little community and have us support you in what you want to do. And so we are also all about showcasing. So we want to show this, right? We want to give you a platform to show those actions and to inspire other young people to start their own group and do that, decide on their own how they want to take action. So we're super excited about this, and we're going to come out with this very soon. But this is something in the near future that we really want to promote. And we really believe that the young people are they're willing and able to do so much more than just the activist side. There's also a bit of a stigma.
I feel like they're also closer to the topic because, well, they have to live longer on this planet. So they see that the need to do something about it much more than, I would say, like much older people who are not so interested, honestly, compared to them.
Yes, absolutely. So that's one big thing that we're doing. Then of course we're also running again spotlights that will come out in May this year. We will focus on youth, obviously, and then on food, so climate positive food security, and asking for young people to bring ideas on how to get to a world where food production is not only sustainable but also contributes to a positive outcome for climate change. So we're excited about that too. And then, as any venture, we received starting capital, if you want to call it that, from our founders. And what we want to do is we want to go between 50 and 100 million Swiss francs. And so we will, set up our pitch book and start pitching everywhere to invest in the future with us, obviously not for a financial return, but for climate return and for a livable future. So that's what we're trying to do and what we will be doing. We're a bit of a different animal, as you can tell. Yeah. So there's no other foundations talking about pitching and
definitely this is extremely new, at least from what I've been exposed to. So
and sometimes people just tilt their head and they look at you like, what animal are you? What are you? So they don't really know what to do with you, and or with us, and I think that's okay. At least they don't forget us, and that makes
you leave
a difference. Yeah, exactly. Better to leave an impression than none. Yeah. So those are the big chunks, I guess, that we're doing, and more funding will, of course, allow us to use what we're doing now as a blueprint for something bigger.
Excellent. And what's next for you individually, Nathalie?
I think I am where I need to be for now. Klima Now is 24 months old.
Yeah.
So I know we seem a lot older, and I am, of course, older. I'm not part of the youth anymore. But no, I am where I need to be, and I want to see this become a its own being and sustainable in itself. And I believe you need the right people in the right places at the right time. And I'm not a fan of just sitting on my seat and not move on. So I think when my time comes, I will make space for somebody else to take Klima Now into the next phase. But for now, I think I'm in the right place, and I'm facing a lot of and enough challenges. So for me, personal growth is important. If things become the same and somewhat of a routine, then it's time for me to move on.
Yeah. Well, you've just started. So
I've just started. So exactly,
you have a lot of things on your plate
absolutely,
to do. So
absolutely.
I don't think it's going to get boring anytime soon.
No, I don't think so either. Yeah.
So for those of us in the younger generations who are affected by climate grief, what do you have to say to them?
Accept your feelings. There's no need to just not acknowledge them. Acknowledge it, accept it, but don't dwell on it. Use that extra energy to focus on what is possible. and look beyond what is today and look into the future and try to find visions of a future that already exists today. If you look at cities like Copenhagen, they show us how we could, how Zurich could look like at some point, with 90% of people on bicycles, for example. If you look towards Norway, where combustion engines will be forbidden in 2025 and they will reach their target earlier, that is possible. And there are solutions here too, and that's why we're big about showcasing. So focus on that. Focus on the positive energy of creating a future rather than on the negativity of it.
Wonderful, thank you. For our listeners, it would be great if you could also give us some recommendations of like resources, books, podcasts, or gadgets that you use and have found very helpful.
I'm not good at this because I don't believe in, you read those 3 books and then you know everything. I work differently. I work in a way where I have conversations with people like you do, and you get inspired by and you learn. And so I think what is the most important is to know what you want to learn, and then just don't be shy in contacting people and having conversations, rather than reading about it in closed chambers in a book. It's about connecting the dots, and that's easier to do in conversation and framing your own theory. Having said that, I rewatched The Inconvenient Truth from Al Gore, and still today it's very accurate, and it shows you just the extension of the challenge and where we're heading. But get in touch with us, get in touch with Klima Now, have a look at all the solutions we're supporting at Spotlight, and you'll learn a lot about the different facets of climate change and what that can actually mean when you translate it into solutions finding.
Wonderful, thank you. So we come to the last exciting segment of this episode, which is the rapid fire questions.
Oh, okay. So I have no time to think.
So what's your biggest ecological sin?
The car. We have a car, and we're gonna exchange it for an electric car.
Okay.
And being married to a Colombian who loves meat, I think that's another sin. But I'm trying to convert him.
Yeah, maybe if he sees your lifestyle, Which brings me to the next question: meat-free or reducitarian?
What is reducitarian?
I'm assuming that this is where you reduce your meat consumption. So if you're completely meat-free, or you just try to reduce?
I try to reduce. I believe in the balance of things. I eat meat, and so does my family, but I prefer to have a expensive, high quality piece of meat once a week or once every 10 days rather than everyday cheap sausages.
What's something you wish everyone knew about a net zero world?
That quality of life will be so much better, and it's such a nice place to imagine to be in.
I think also how we would live with each other would be different, right? Because we won't be thinking out of so much greed and more out of compassion.
Yes, and I think getting there will require us as humans to come together.
Yeah.
And it's a wonderful thought to think that we got there together. And I think it's a different awareness that is there, and a different compassion for each other, and understanding of, that everything has to be in balance. And if we want to stay here, we need to respect that balance. So I think I wish that people had this positive feeling about a net zero future, and not it's so costly to get there, because it's a lot less costly than not getting there.
What's a climate solution or technology that you're particularly excited about?
There's many. I think it's fascinating that you can suck CO2 from the air and direct air capture technologies invented here in Switzerland. I also think it's exciting to look at things like how to produce real cheese not made from cows, which is what we're looking at. But I'm also excited to look at projects that work on, how can we develop tools for farmers to transition their farms into regenerative practices and lower the barriers for them, which is less techy, but more, let's say, systematic approaches. So I'm excited about many things. It has a huge impact. And, everything that has to do with mind shift of different target groups and society as large is exciting. It's less of a technology, but it's definitely not easy.
Well, thank you so much, Nathalie,
Thank
for
you
this
too.
talk. It was really insightful and
Thank you.
Also very inspiring.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, you can support us by rating our show on Apple Podcasts. This way, we can reach an ever-growing number of aspiring entrepreneurs.